All right. Wonderful. Let me grab my notes. Thank you so much. And my pen. Thank you.
Did you need your tea?
Sure, I'll take my tea. Wonderful. Well, we are so excited to have this fantastic panel today to really be talking about kind of the lived experience of caregivers and those who care for caregivers and really advocate for them. And so it is my pleasure to introduce our four panelists today. I'm just project. Okay, I'll pretend that my microphone is there. So first we have Megumi Moisen, who's the family caregiver of a person living with dementia, and also the care manager at Little Tokyo Service Center Community Development Corporation, as well as a volunteer of the Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy Program. Next to Megumi is Angie Morin, Senior Care Counselor of Alzheimer's Los Angeles. Then we have Christopher Christensen, Research and Program Director of the HIV Aging Research Project. And last but certainly not least, Tanis Sugden, Senior Director of Care Management at Independent Living Systems. So I'm going to start asking our panelists a little bit about kind of if you can provide a little bit of a summary of either your caregiving situation or some of the work that you do for our caregivers in terms of either direct services or kind of speaking about kind of some of the professional work that you do on behalf of caregivers. And let's actually start with Megumi over here.
Okay, my name is Megumi. I am very honored to be here to share caregivers' perspective. My case, I took care of my dementia husband for 7 years, and that means very beginning of the dementia all the way to the end. So during that time, as his condition progresses, I have to learn how to communicate with him and also how to evaluate what he has, what his capacity left, and those are always learning, keep adapting, keep learning, keep adapting. So that is the kind of stuff. So that exhausted me a lot. And then I was not successful to cultivate assistance from family members, which is partially my husband, a Mexican-American machismo, and he wanted to be remembered as a great father and a strong brother. So they just told me not to tell him. And he had social anxiety, that is another one. And my case, in my culture, Japanese culture, they are not asking for help is discouraged, more like not bothering anybody. So that is my cultural background. And at the same time, my family members, my stepsons are taking care of their biological mother with dementia and cancer. So I was not able to do that. I was not good. That was my failure, and and also I regret that not being able to involve other family members. And also, as I said, that diagnosis of dementia come with stigma. And that depressed my husband, and that his depression affected me. And always his care is the first, and also go to his doctor's visit, but I skipped all my annual physical 3-4 years. And this is my experience as a caregiver, and also I worked as a care manager or case management at the Little Tokyo Service Center. So basically, mainly work with, Japanese, seniors, like even naturalized citizen or Japanese American or Japanese green card holder. And the current, recent trends, two trends actually, I recognize, many of us recognize. And many Japanese, people or green card holders and sometimes naturalized citizens go back to Japan because of the high cost, extremely high cost of caregiving. And also assisted living. So they can afford, and if you have Medi-Cal, you are lucky, but middle class, it is really tough. And also another one is, so there are many widowed male, female with no children. Then the question is, who is going to take care of those population? Which needs to involve the social perspective and working for the legislature or something and come up with something to help both population. Okay.
Thank you so much. That was, I think, I jotted down a variety of really important themes that I'd love for us to touch upon today. Let's turn to Angie.
Yes. Again, my name is Angie Moran. I'm the Senior Care Counselor at Alzheimer's Los Angeles. I assist identified caregivers and family members that are caring for someone that has Alzheimer's disease or another related dementia. The focus of care counselor is a lot of disease education. We do a lot of community resource linkages and work with community partners for that. And but most of all, more importantly, we are a listening, empathetic ear for caregivers and family members through the progression of the journey of their loved one. As care counselors, we also have support groups. We have different specialties in the support groups as far as we have one for adult children specifically. We have one for spouses. We have one for Spanish speaking. We have a couple of Spanish speaking. Me in particular, I do have a Spanish speaking support group. And we have them in different platforms, whether they be call-in, virtual, and we also had them in person. So we always encourage support groups for our caregivers to help process and for them not to feel alone in this journey, because that's something that I do hear in working with families, that they didn't know our resources were out there. We wish we would have known sooner that you were here. And, you know, I can't believe this is happening to me. We're so alone, but to hear from others in support groups that they're going through the same thing, it's very beneficial for them. And we also have a helpline, and we take turns being on the helpline. We also have volunteers for our helpline, and we always encourage, you know, community partners like yourself to send them our way through either via the helpline, or we also have a referral system that's called Al's Direct Connect. And with that is an actual referral form. We partner with other clinics and they send that our way. That's how people get connected with us, either via helpline call, via, you know, a family or a neighbor told me to call you, or also directly from clinics themselves. And it's an actual referral form. They get sent to us, it's triaged, the care counselor will follow up and close the gap there and get back to you as a referring party on what happened with that referral, if they were connected with us to join our care counseling program, or we just, you know, something as, you know, we provided some disease education and family was okay with that and we'll call at a later time. But for the most part, the most important, all of our services are free. So when caregivers get to hear that, that's always a positive for them. Again, not knowing that we were out there earlier to be able to benefit from our resources. And we also do have its own department for early stages. So we always encourage, you know, our families, you know, through either health fairs or presentations to be out there, learning more about the disease and hopefully go to the doctor early to try to detect this early. But me coming from a Latino background and working with that population, that is not the case for us. It could be due to stigma, it could be due to a variety of other reasons. But that's something that we're trying to, again, provide disease education to the Latino community.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Angie. And now to hear from Christopher.
So I was asked to speak to caregiving for people with HIV. And in the beginning, when someone would be affected by AIDS or HIV and actually get sick enough they need caregiving, it would often progress into hospice. And there was a group of friends there, maybe people that moved from across the country to one city and they met and became friends in that support system. So the individual in the hospice had a support as they went through that journey to the end of life. But now many of these people that used to be there to support people are aging and they don't have that same support system. I appreciate hearing about family caregivers and especially the generational aspect of that and how many people living with HIV don't have that kind of support system. They've encountered all sorts of stigma or levels of rejection over their life, sometimes even finding healthcare, much less friends that they could talk to or could bring them a meal when they get sick. So the organization I work for, we're trying to develop a village online with people so that there was a way for them to connect before they need that. And we also are encouraging people to start to contact each other each morning. You know, how you doing? You doing okay? It's a bright sunny day. Good. Talk to you later. But it's a check-in. And it's really hard to get independent people to start developing those kinds of systems for things that they're going to need in 5 or 10 years down the line. And so some of my experience with that is that people who have gotten sick and are at a certain point where friends or other state institutions or county can't take care of them, and they go to live with people that are relatives, but maybe some of the same people that had rejected them initially, and now they have to go depend on them. I had one situation where this person called up very distressed that they keep trying to change who they are. They keep trying to either save them or, you know, bring them, you know, to a place that they feel that people should be at the end of life. And it's really hard. And I've observed, I mean, 3 I can name right off of people that have gone to Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and have to come back to California and set up their household again, or find a place that they can live, get connected with medical services again. So we're trying to address some of that ahead of time. And part of that is developing those networks of friends and people that can take care of you. And then we're also looking for guidance on how to access and manage state programs. There's been a lot of work done in the Office of Aging, and they've made some focus for people living with HIV. But some of those systems and programs seem very remote and are kind of hard to access. So that's something I've observed also, is that folks are trying to help and they don't always know, you know, what tools that they have. And then if I might add something else in, because of that lack of family support, that might include grandchildren or even great-grandchildren, giving them love and hugs. You know, people don't have that. And I've come out of some doctor appointments where they turn to me and say, you know, the doctor didn't even touch me. He listened to my heart, but he didn't touch me. Or they have a perception, whether it's true or not, that folks are walking around them, you know, that they used to be part of a social group, and now they see this person is ill and might leave the social group, and they start creating a little distance that just doesn't happen with family. And so some of those issues in particular, we're trying to develop and look at how we can do more to address some of those social behavioral issues that have to do with the person's sense of worth and who that person is. And I think one of the people said that, we want, the individual to be seen. Like, that's what they desire. They want to be seen. And, many times they're just overlooked. They've been overlooked by society before. So it really, has an impact on that, and especially for some of the, programs that are being developed, just, how we can manage that better for people who are single. Right now, 50% of gay men live alone. And not all people with HIV are gay, but, a big majority of them are. So 50% of those folks are living by themselves, and how do we build those systems and get them connected to, let them have purpose and value at the end of their life?
Those are really powerful themes, and certainly I think this, the topic of isolation and loneliness is one that I would love to come back to, particularly both with persons living with chronic diseases, but also with the caregivers who experience that. So thank you so much. And Tanis.
So I bring a little bit different perspective to the table. So I have had the pleasure of working with independent living systems for almost 8 years now. And over that course of time, things have changed greatly. So just to give you the scope of our contact, so I work with community health workers, care managers, and housing navigators who provide services to Medi-Cal patients. Last year, so I have 200 staff, and last year we touched about 35,000 people in 36 counties. So we have a really broad reach. And when we first started giving support to caregivers and people living in the community who wanted to stay independent, we really experienced caregivers who needed training to know what they were doing, and support because they felt very isolated. So those were very common themes. What has transpired over the course of 8 years is things have become much more complicated. There hasn't really been a change in terms of patients. Now, we call our patients members, so I'll just say that I flip words sometimes, yeah, interchangeably. But through that time, if we go fast forward, so I was speaking to a care manager yesterday, and we were trying to troubleshoot caregiving in a particular situation. Our patient, our member, is 92 years old, and she lives out in Victorville. Her caregiver is 78 years old and is her daughter, and drives from Ontario, who had a health crisis. Whose daughter takes care of a disabled teenager, and lives in the north of the state. And so those kind of complex situations are ones that, you know, as we look at the sort of simplicity of what is caregiving, who is a caregiver, I think we have to acknowledge the profound complexities that people find themselves in. And the other piece, I mean, we've touched today, and I really had the pleasure of listening into some extraordinary bright minds, and I have to say, you know, I don't get to get out much, so it really is a lovely pleasure. You know, we talk about dementia, and we talk about, maybe some, you know, deficit skills and whatnot, but what we're seeing in the field, about 25% of our membership needs to have IHSS, in part to support family members who are doing the work and consequently not doing paid work, right? So I think it has some real utility for, you know, not keeping this spiral of poverty and illness continuing, at least holding it in place for a little while. And the other piece is, of course, paid registered caregivers. The challenge being that the workforce is extremely depleted, and finding people, if you don't have family, is a real challenge. And I think we have to acknowledge that and acknowledge that those who need to be brought into that framework need to reflect the cultural complexities that we are facing. And truly, we see every type of person with every type of background. And we need to be able to have our caregivers meet the nuances of that. But one of the complexities we really see is the complexity of mental health issues complicating, sort of the aging process and what caregivers are faced with, as well as substance use disorders. Both of those elements need to be on the table and studied alongside those because they are so complicated. Now we're having, we need to train caregivers in de-escalation, in violence prevention, the list suddenly went. And so some of those kinds of things are really the things I'm hoping to be able to share with you during this time.
That's fantastic. And I should say, one of the things that we asked our panel to really think about, because we have this amazing opportunity to connect folks with lived experience and those who care for those with lived experience, is how do we inform the research community in questions and areas and gaps that really should be filled? And so I think our panelists are bringing up, I'm just circling all these things, and I'm like, oh, research question, to make sure that, again, some of these experiences are reflected in the research that we all do, and really are able to serve our community. One of the things that I think, nearly everybody brought up was this idea of navigating these very complex systems. And I'm wondering if you can all talk a little bit about how do you, what have been some of your experiences in either personally, if as a caregiver, navigating these complex medical and, kind of state systems or programs, or helping others, what are some gaps in terms of, what you're seeing of that navigation piece? And feel free to, we can either go down the road or we can just have, folks speak.
Yeah, integration of medical system, especially, as a caregiver under pressure all the time, it's really difficult, really almost impossible. And as a HICAP volunteer, HICAP counselor, I know the Medicare offers this benefit, that benefit, but how to get there is there's nobody's there to teach or tell them. And I would say it's very customized, more like a healthcare system concierge. We need that kind of services. Otherwise, especially those who limited English and also somebody old, it's really difficult, almost impossible, I would say.
I could piggyback on what Nagumi's saying. I've heard a lot of families and caregivers not understand when they're at the doctor's office and they get a diagnosis, then they send them away and I'll see you in 6 months. They don't know what to do in the in-between, which is kind of where our program comes in. But they're just left with a loss of words, and some of it is even more challenging with, again, for me, working with the Latino community, the limited English or the not understanding everything that they're telling them, not being able to have a family member there with them to try to translate what was said. So within the healthcare system, the doctors themselves or the neurologists themselves, whoever they're seeing, to be able to explain in their own language, I think would be very helpful. And also the material that's provided to them in their own language as well. So that is a big challenge here, at least initially when they get the diagnosis. But I think another challenge also is just recently, even yesterday, I talked with a client that did not know, again, while they were at the doctor's office, they didn't disclose this or offer this up initially months ago. All the DME equipment they could have gotten, and family caregiver already spent out of pocket. And, they're already on a limited income. So them having to do that was something big and then to hear, oh, we could order that for you. It's like, why didn't you tell me that last year?
Yeah.
When I told you this, so that was something big that just occurred yesterday with one of my clients and again, having to navigate that, not knowing the unknown, not knowing what to ask or the healthcare or the professionals not offering up that information to them. And another big one that I hear is, I heard you mention Medi-Cal and IHSS and, to be able to obtain Medi-Cal is challenging in itself. And for those that are able to qualify for it, that's great for them. There's a lot of services that come with getting Medi-Cal where, member can go to adult day center, not have to pay out of pocket. Or then the IHSS where we have somebody coming in to give that care. But what happens to those that don't qualify for Medi-Cal? They're left in the in-between and, they're not low income, but they're not rich either. So they're in the in-between and that's where the frustration comes in for them. What do we do now? What about us? We need a break and that's where the caregiver burnout sometimes comes in as well.
Something that I was hearing, and that would be really helpful, that I've seen the checkoff list for patients and everything that we should be doing for the patients. It's like we need a checkoff list and a booklet for the caregiver and things that they should be looking at and thinking ahead of time that would be in a concentrated, format. I didn't look on the California aging website. I should have done that ahead of time to see what offering they might have, but I did see their patient checkoff list. So that is what made me kind of think of how do I know what I don't know? How do I find out about what I don't know? And then it is frustrating also for people who are single, who don't have those family networks to start dealing with their illness and getting that information also what's available. It does get hard. So one thing that we could really use that doesn't seem to be plentiful are case managers and people that can help really negotiate or manage the path for the individuals. And that's all.
So given that I do work with those folks who have qualified for Medi-Cal, that's really our focal point. So I just want to point out something that's going right. It's always, everything presents challenges, everything does, but there is a flip side and our state is really at the forefront of that. And so I just want to acknowledge that there are people who are trying to break down the silos of systems and stop duplication. Because ultimately we'd have enough money if we'd stop doing things over and over again that are kind of marginally effective. And so, we've really seen a lot of new members / patients through the CalAIM program. And so for those of you, I see some nods, but not a lot of nods. The CalAIM program is really intended to reach our most vulnerable members in California and channel them into getting enhanced care management, a care manager who can transcend the system based on a population of focus. And that population of focus can be, children in the Children's Services organization, domestic violence, people who have experienced domestic violence, those who are at serious risk of homelessness, and of course, mental health and SUD. And it does include also those people who need to transition out of the hospital or their skilled nursing facility into a more independent, healthful environment. That's part of the CalAIM program. Connecting people up to that program, I think is a tremendous asset because there are 14 community supports they could potentially have, including homemaker services and personal care that can top up IHSS. And respite care, there's a variety of things depending on, what their needs are. and care managers that can help steer folks through these services. And I have to say that, you know, we've built capabilities and competencies as we've gone along. So many of my care managers came in with, you know, lived experience, social backgrounds, whatever. And now, you know, their abilities to help someone navigate the medical system. And God bless the Alzheimer's Association, because, you know, first of all, corporate sponsors. Second of all, the Alzheimer's Walk is coming up, so come and visit Angie there. You know, that partnerships make the difference. So, you know, I know that there are huge barriers between corporations, of which I'm one, community, nonprofits, you know, public advocacy organizations and researchers. Forgive me, get rid of them. You know, it takes a phone call, an email. It really can help us all get through the barriers if we just don't let them be in the way, right? I mean, that's the one thing about being at the table, because it's a table. So I really think we were making positive strides to get as much support as possible. Yes, there are absolutely gaps all over the place, but good things are happening. And I wouldn't want you to walk out the door with all the sort of cloud around your head without knowing that you're part of something really remarkable happening in the state.
Thank you so much, Janice, for bringing some optimism to our table, and especially this is a challenging topic with a lot of real challenges. And I am gonna go back to some of our challenges.
There's always gotta be balance.
Right? Gotta be balanced. But perhaps we can kind of highlight some areas where things are getting better. And I think I want to talk about this issue of loneliness and social isolation, both for our older adults and for the people caring for them. You know, Megumi mentioned that, you know, one of the challenges family caregivers face is that other family members may not necessarily want to step up and, you know, care, or they may not have the capacity. They're caring for others. And so I'm wondering if you all can speak a little bit, either again, through your lived experience or in helping caregivers kind of with issues of loneliness and social isolation, you know, that you've seen in your experience.
I'll speak.
Yeah.
And forgive me, Tanis, I do have to correct you. I'm from Alzheimer's Los Angeles.
Sorry.
But Alzheimer's, yes, Association we're having a festival. So if you want to hear more about that. But yes, I mean, we do hear that a lot. And again, we do always encourage, again, a lot of disease education. We do want them to understand that they can call us as their care counselor anytime. You know, we do obviously get off of work at 5, but if they need somebody, you know, we'll call them back the next day, and that's what our helpline is there for as well. But we always encourage support groups. I can't stress enough the support groups. And we have them at different times during the day, different capacities. So we always encourage, I know they're hesitant at the beginning, but we do let them know that, you know, you're gonna be there with others. You might not be in the same stage, but you'll get to hear some tips maybe that you didn't think of before, or you could just, you know, not talk and just listen. So we always encourage support groups, when we feel that they need just a little bit tad more, that they are dealing maybe with some mental health, or just need a little bit more therapy, more intense, then we do also link to therapists. We give them outside resources for that as well. We ourselves don't do therapy, but we do help, you know, link them with therapists for themselves. And we always encourage, go back to your primary or your own doctor for some guidance.
And out in the desert, we have Kimberly Spiegel, you know her?
I don't.
Our Alzheimer's group out in the desert. But our experience is that we work with Alzheimer and Parkinson's patients together. And we have a couple of programs for some people that either had a stroke or Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, in developing their speaking ability again, and working on those programs. And we've put the caregivers for both those conditions, the people living with the condition are in one room and all the caregivers are together. And it's just amazing the things that happen in that shared environment. And from that, then they are able to learn from each other how to get connected to some of these other systems. So I had the privilege of being involved with someone that needed those services, and I could see that connection where some of the other folks that I have are missing that support system and be able to make the connections in their community. Because it's just not getting that service, but it's also finding those individuals that are living with that so you can gain the same lived experience, understanding from that, and feel like you're not alone. So we do appreciate what's going on in that realm. And from my experience, people living with HIV do not get dementia as much as some other kinds of conditions because of accelerated aging. The HIV will accelerate organs at a much faster pace. So they're often dealing with other kinds of conditions, different cancers that show up early, and actually the ability not to get around, which then contributes to their lack of cognitive ability or lack of the ability to keep up.
Is there anything you wanted to add, Nadine?
During my caregivers period, I didn't participate in events and but I took all the webinar with you. But my case, my personal case is I was still able to have part-time job. It was really part-time, like 4 hours, 8 hours a week. And our organization, LTSC, allow me to work flexibly. And of course, thanks to Amy, my supervisor. Yeah, that was really great because I can still communicate with the, like my colleagues. It was very refreshing. Yeah. And so still get out from my caregiving world to actually work in the workforce, and that was really great. Thanks.
I do want to add also that I think that's where respite care comes in also. There's a lot of programs out there just like ours that are only able to offer short-term respite. And that's always a little bit difficult to be able to tell the caregiver, that it's only for this amount of hours and that's it. So I think, but even that, for that little bit amount of hours, they're so appreciative when they're able to, go out to see a movie or go have lunch with a friend or, whatever it is, at least to try to break a little bit of that isolation and have some normalcy in their life.
Absolutely. And Christopher, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the peer support check-in program that you're trying to develop. I thought that was really interesting. Just tell us a little bit about, how that's, you mentioned it's been somewhat challenging, but would love to hear more about that.
Over a number of years, we've been trying to get individuals to do that on their own, and that has been so hard. So we were developing this online village to meet other needs in the community, but most of it is just about connection and reducing isolation. And COVID, oh my, what an interesting demonstration of that was, and then how people re-engage, how they come out of COVID. So what we've been trying to do with the village is to do things that are online, that are either maybe instructive and then interactive where people can discuss. And then we're also moving out of that realm into real life stuff. So we've been trying to put together the movie days or a dog walk. The dog walk has been really popular because then it's not only sharing your pet and everyone loves their dog, but it's getting them to move, it's getting them out thinking, and even now that the heat has gone down in the desert, out into the sunshine. And it is kind of like living in Minnesota to a certain extent, except flipped. We have to manage like running from the car to the house to get out of the heat, and then from the car to the grocery store, or all that. We're in Minnesota, they're trying to avoid the cold and they're running in the house to get warm. So it is flipped a little bit when we try to have regular established programs where we're getting people together to meet face to face. And we also have another program that it's called PALS. It's Planning Ahead for Lesbian and Gay Seniors. And this is dealing more with some of that technical aspect where they're actually looking at the forms, like you're living alone and what's going to happen if they find you in the floor and they have to take you to the hospital and no one has authority to say, don't put you on life support or do put you on life support. And this is part of the process of getting people to think about how they're going to manage themselves in that future, why we're trying to get the connections a little earlier. So we get, the medical power of attorney and some of the other issues. We do have one brochure that's called 7 Essential Conversations. So this is what we're really pushing people to be a part of. Engage, okay, you have that cousin or brother that rejected you, now you're 60 years old, this is the time to engage with them. And here's a guide for things you should talk about. What are we doing with this time of life? What health experiences are you, that you have that our folks had? It's going through making sure that you have someone that can be called to help take care of you if they're not living with you. So, we're trying to build some of those programs in that way. I hope that answers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I was thinking too specifically about what, we've talked about earlier in our wonderful retreat is this idea of generationally, as we're seeing people have fewer children or they're doing long distance caregiving, right? There's a variety of ways in which, many communities can benefit from some of these resources and programs. So one of the themes that we've really come across, both in that you all have all mentioned, but this has also come across in our retreat, is this issue of how do we connect people to services, right? People are often, it's like time and time again, this happens. And I'm curious, within your own kind of professional experiences, for example, how do people find you? What have been successful outreach methods? Angie, you mentioned the Alzheimer's kind of referral pathway, and I'm curious to hear more about your experiences. Like, is that working quite well? Are there ways in which that could work better? Would love to hear from all of you of how do people end up finding their these wonderful services?
Well, let me just make a note, which is, we talked about the value of the primary care physician in this world. I'm not sure how many of you have been into the primary care physician lately, but that's 7 minutes of your life. And they're not going to give you anything more than the form that they need to fill out in order to meet whatever, regulatory HEDIS requirement is there. And so looking at other avenues for disseminating information is critical and key. The recent addition of community health workers to the cocktail of health providers, I think will hopefully help in that regard. There's no doubt that we've got all sorts of great tools being developed and information that's available, but coordinating that, it's like being in a snowstorm of paper virtually. So looking at, we generally find that traditional existing mechanisms of communication that a person already has is the best way. Don't invent anything new, please. That connecting, so if they are someone who, reads the newspaper, going through the newspaper, the AARP avenues, and all, both digitally and non-digitally. So God bless 211s and all of that. There are a variety of referral services, and trying to get to the right one as opposed to the ones that are, we'll give you the resource, but you're paying us for it on some back end way. You have to be a little bit cautious about that. I think that I encourage you to look at the population that you're working with and what are their existing communication patterns, rather than inventing another new tool. Because people are pretty overwhelmed out there, in our experience.
And might I interject, a trick that I found that really helps, you mentioned about the time a doctor can really spend with you. And I thought it was 15 minutes, darn, it sounded so. It's like, I've been asking for individuals, physician assistants. And what I have found is that they have the direct conduit to the physician, so there's like not any depreciation of a service. And they can spend the time with you, they're on a different kind of clock. And they're even less formal, and I found that sometimes there's even like a little comfort that comes with it. And they're not saddled to the computer. So they're able to look a person in their eyes and like really make the patient feel like they're getting everything that that person has to give for that moment. And so I would just encourage people to use that as one of the tools to get a more satisfying medical experience, or in the doctor's office experience of asking for the physician assistant.
Or NP.
Or,
Don't forget
yeah,
those
or
nurses.
the nurse practitioner, are, yeah,
Yeah.
just as good and wonderful. And,
I think they're better educators, because of how much time they have with FaceTime with the patient.
and they use real language. They don't use, all the medical language. They, can speak directly to the patient. And then also because they're kind of focusing, if the patient isn't getting it, then they can see, oh, well, let me say this another way or something. And, it's been a godsend that these physicians have come up now.
Yeah, the important, the physician extenders, as they're
Yes.
often known, absolutely, very, very powerful. Yeah, Angie and Megumi, I would love to hear from you both about how people are finding your services and maybe ways that have been really effective to kind of to lead on some more positive notes.
Well, yeah, just circling back to, we try to be everywhere and anywhere out in the community. We have our own education team, and the team, goes out wherever anybody will have us, basically. Whether that is to provide a class, an education presentation on what Alzheimer's is. And also, to maybe leave some of our flyers there. But, we've been out at churches, we've been out at libraries, we've been out at clinics, at hospitals. We really, at assisted living, we work with the service coordinators there. So we really are everywhere, wherever they would have us. And then we also have our professional development team, and they're the ones that are out there working with the doctors and the social workers, training them on, how to manage dementia patients and, what services are out there. That's where the Alzheimer's referral form comes in, that they present to them. That's how they can connect with us through via their way whenever they see a patient. But, just again, we have billboards, we have social media, we have our help. Yeah, we have a variety of ways you can get a hold of us.
Language is always a issue for the Japanese community. Japanese speaking population is less than 5% of their county. That means no publications in Japanese. So language. That's a main issue of work. So Asian community has more than 10 languages spoken. So only Korean and Chinese, those are the two languages. And for those small groups like Japanese, it's really difficult to reach out. And also the method of reaching out is probably two different systems for approaching different generations of caregivers. Like like 80 years old, 70 years old wife is taking care of 90 years old or something like that. That's probably just putting the big posters, some newsletters, and some paper. Some printed thing is work. And for the younger generations, like 40s, 50s, taking care of parents, probably the text or some email blast might work. Yeah.
Absolutely. It really speaks to the importance of tailoring from generationally, from a tech savvy perspective, language, absolutely. Really excellent points. At this point, I would love to open it up to the audience, to either if you have questions for our panel or your own lived experiences that you wanted to share. I think one of the things that I want our panel to kind of reflect on is, what are some things that you wish researchers would focus on that would improve the lives of caregivers and the persons that you're caring for? That's one of my final questions, but would love to hear from the audience as well.
I wanted to mention this before, to make the researchers aware of the fact that the minority aging population does not know how to read. So handing them printed materials is not going to be an effective way of publicizing and announcing your program. The face-to-face interaction would be much better, but, as a former director of senior center, good members of our population that came to the center were not able to read, and we're embarrassed to let you know they did not know how to read. So,
And if you've been around some of our youth these days, they don't either. So having large visual descriptors, the sort of Instagram approach to communication, I think on both sides of the age spectrum can be useful.
Yeah, excellent points. Amy.
When I think about caregivers, and I was having a conversation, this is a little while back with a board member of ours who was talking about a caregiving challenge and was like, you should do a workshop on XYZ. And I was like, we literally did a month ago, and I confessed in that moment, I was like a little annoyed. And then I thought about it and it was like, this person wasn't looking for that information at that time. So it was like it didn't exist to them a month ago, right? So I was thinking even, Dr. when you're talking about, just like when you were talking, I thought, it's not just research, medical and public health, it's like sociology and then marketing, like marketing research.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about for caregiving, like, do we need that kind of marketing research? At what point is the information useful? Or just like vaccine uptake, like how do we get caregiver information uptake, right? Like, because we're all gonna go through it, but it's like nobody's looking for it until you're in the middle of it, and then I don't know.
Yeah.
But like the whole online stuff, right? Like maybe if more of it is available, like how do we make it accessible? But the uptake is a big question to me.
So I have a follow-up kind of common question is, what is your perception about the use of digital programs? So I create digital programs on the space similar to Francesca, right? And how do you see digital programs as an opportunity to provide people access to micro-learning by themselves at their own time, creating simple programs that maybe use audio files? Like sometimes I use audio because I know when people can read, right? As you mentioned, right? So what is your vision about like the population you work with, right? Will they be engaged? What will be the opportunities or challenges to use digital tools to get people to learn when they need to learn or when they want to learn, right?
I think for my population, it would be helpful because I get asked whenever we have a webinar or there's a conference, is this being recorded that we can see at a later time because we're not able to attend. So I think having something like that where they could just hear it at their own time is helpful. And we also incorporated that with some of our, we have a couple of telenovelas that were done. And, you know, now we have them on YouTube and they're able to see them at their own time. We also have some caregiving, topics, you know, just for example, one on home safety or medication or behaviors, also a quick snippet of a video where they could also go in at their own time and, you know, listen to it or see it. So for my population, I think, you know, it would be helpful to them because they could do it at their own leisure because they don't have time. I always hear that. They don't have time.
So my experience, yeah, as I mentioned before, and I got information for Alzheimer's but early, my case is, you know, my husband got early diagnosis. That means only early stage of caregiving, your brain assimilate information. After mid stage and late stage, I would say just take something, my husband did crazy, I had to respond to that. So early diagnosis important for the caregiver too.
Yes.
And also my therapist told me that this is the time for memory making. Yeah, so that's really helped that I just spend time with my husband, travel and go to concerts or something like that. What he has, we still enjoy what he has, and so that's a kind of perspective. So at the end of the caregiving, you know, you don't have time for it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point and very poignant. Sorry, thank you, Megumi. You know, on my side, if people need the tools when they need the tool, right? Like we all know how to basically figure out a screwdriver. I mean, I think we can get that far. And so when I go into the drawer, I need the screwdriver. When I need the screwdriver, I don't need the pliers. And the same is true when we go to use our tools, that it's got to be tuned. So I realized y'all went into, you know, research and come from a variety of specialties, but you know, it is going to take matching the market to like you need the right person with the, you know, right cultural approach at that moment in time, and that is available. But that's no different than you and the ads they're trying to target at you. So, you know, there's a lot of information out there, and there's no reason that we can't look across the hall at those people are, you know, down the road and to the right, at universities for that information so that we get better at what we do in terms of information delivery. And I think the other thing is making sure that the professionals have those tools at that moment they get that call, or they have the member, you know, it's like they're on site. You know, does the community health worker have access to that in that moment? And that I think is something that is really valuable. So that's
more of a comment or a challenge that we all face in research and then also in the resource distribution to our end is sometimes it's just a lot of information, and a lot of options. I think you mentioned the duplication of things, right? Which is helpful in a way, because it's like, oh, you have all these support groups, and you have all these support groups, and you have all these support groups. And then the same thing for different resources. I think that one of the challenges that all of us will have to kind of figure out is like, what are the most important things to get them tapped in and get their foot in the door? Because it's decision paralysis. I know I do when I'm like picking up, you know, which one to get in that. So I can only imagine when you have all of these resources, what are the differences between them? I have 3 minutes while my spouse is asleep to figure this out.
Yeah.
I don't hear anymore because I don't know. I think that's one thing. I'm not sure if you all have thought about that, or even, you know, I'm still learning the differences, Alzheimer's Association, Alzheimer's LA, you know, who does what and what's overlapping, what's the same, what's different. And that's me as a neurologist, right? And so I can only imagine, for caregivers and their families, but I know there's no real answer probably for that, but just something that I'm thinking as you all are speaking.
Well, what's most important thing is different than your most important thing, right? And so it's very situational. It's also incredibly culturally driven, right? Like, you know, I like Christopher, it's like, I don't have family. So don't be, anything targeting that is just never gonna reach me at all. And so, you know, in that regard, I think we have to be, you know, kind of down in the weeds with lots of variation to see what sticks where, right? I mean, one of the disadvantages of sort of scientific methodology is you're looking for the averages, you're looking, you know, and the reality is it's gonna take way more of the specifics. I almost like a more, it's like, okay, you know, genetics is gonna drive all sorts of variation in medicine, and shouldn't we be thinking along the same lines, which is, you know, we have a huge amount of diversity. What's gonna work within that is going to have to be highly customized. But we live in a highly technological world where that customization can take place if we can get there. And I think, you know, one of the positive approaches of AI is to help us get there, right? I think that's a real potential.
I wanted to thank you, Christopher, and I love the panel, but both of you for bringing us back to touch and the humanity of caregiving and from all spaces that you're touching this. And I just think about your journey, Megumi, you know, Christopher, I remember both my parents as they were transitioning, just not feeling human, always having blood drawn, always, anytime someone touched them, it was to traumatize their body. And both in the hospital and the nursing home, crawling into my parents' bed with them and just holding them, you know, as an adult and returning that touch. But then also as a caregiver, you know, when are you getting hugged and touched? And I think as a researcher, really thinking about boundary management, because so much of our work is about drawing boundaries, you know, whether it's the tail end of the distribution or legally our agency can't do X. But I think we have to hold some space for that. How are we touching people and how are people getting compassion in these journeys? Even with the research.
Absolutely.
So kind of a related point, Christopher mentioned we have to go to a physician assistant to get good care. And it seems like it's the kind of thing we would like our doctors to do. And just wondered if anyone has read Why We Evolve.
Well,
Kind of a book about patient evolution to try to get away from industrial healthcare.
and I only mention that in terms of what.
No, I'm not criticizing.
No, but what the insurance companies do to us
Yeah.
and do to the doctors, that they can't necessarily help it, but then how do you make your own workaround? That's what
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted.
because the insurance
Is there anything
companies,
that can be
they're,
done so that you don't always have to do that when you go to a primary care doctor, you're stuck in this system.
You know, having worked for the evil empire for some time in my career, I just want to make sure that I also, you know, the corporate environment here in California for healthcare does have some benefits. Most patients haven't spent any time whatsoever with looking at what their health plan actually offers them and how to interact and get the best from it. And I know because I spent a lot of time on the Knox-Keene Act, you know, that is why they have driven California's Medi-Cal members into a managed care environment, is so that we can have those supporting programs in place. So there is, you know, both the evil empire and the, you know, make sure it's like, it's a service you're paying for. So make sure you're getting the, you know, squeezing the orange dry. Because we require it as a state to offer these services, and there may be something up you know, your alley. So my ex-wife was a physician assistant, so I feel like I can say this, but you know, she didn't understand the levers that are available because she didn't understand that most, you know, commercial health plans are self-insured. So the decision maker isn't the insurance company, it's actually the HR office. And so if something's being denied, everything has to be consistent. If something's being denied, the lever isn't to go and bang on the insurance company. It's to have that member go back to their employer and say, this is what's happening to me, can you help? Because they're self-insured, right? Managed care, the levers are through the Department of Healthcare, right? And all that, not the Knox-Keene Act. So make sure that, we don't just say, the evil empire, the insurance company, but also what are you getting out of it? Like, you're paying for a service, are you getting everything you can?
And I think that speaks maybe to one of the themes we talked about earlier is this issue, the complexity of navigation, right? Like, and goes back to issues of literacy, right? Like, how do you know what your health plan? I mean, this happens to me every year where we have to choose a health plan and I'm supposed to be the expert and I'm reading through these documents. I'm like, I still don't really know what's covered.
That's all about.
So, right, so it's really, it's maybe having that community health worker, that care navigator who can help somebody understand all the services that are offered.
Yeah, and sometimes, if you're at a Medi-Cal level, the managed care plan, but if you're, at an insurance, commercial insurance, is there anything that the patient management department can do for me to help me manage this? Well, they have care managers in-house. So there are some things that, you can go back and ask for if you learn how the evil empire works. Or know somebody who does, or that is the benefit of care managers. Two brilliant women at the table who do exactly that. So, using that and making sure that your patients are using the resources that they can in that moment, that you can have that conversation before, you get to the end stage and you're working with totally different issues and the emotions are running high.
We had a, question here and then
So
over here.
quick question. So I know that some of you mentioned language,
Mhm.
language access, right? And I run a Spanish speaking Latina caregiver support group every Monday, right? And the navigation of the system is so complex and it's not only the language.
Yeah.
It's language and cultural intersectionality and all those components. Like they're suffering because they don't have access. They cannot speak with them. And then, we can talk about promotoras de la salud. I'm a native speaker, right? Podemos trabajar, like, let me just put the bomb here. It's like, todo esto en inglés, right? We're talking in English, right? Pero nuestras comunidades normalmente hablan other languages, right? So then, like, how do you see change the systems? So then our language majorities don't fall through the cracks and suffer more than they need to. It's a big question.
It's a
But I know
very
that's what I'm thinking of it.
More bilingual care providers, right? I think it's more bilingual education.
I want to add something. I was just telling Kathy, she's one of my bosses. I was just telling her a story that one of my families had to deal with. And again, when you hear your family goes to the doctor is, almighty, whatever they say is, it's word, it's gold. But I had a family that went and they went to see the primary care physician because daughter was noticing issues with mom. But primary care physician said it's just normal aging, old age. Being that, the daughter did a little more research and she knew, no, something's not right with mom, something is not right. She again went to primary third times to advocate. And finally, she pushed her, I need the referral to the neurologist. If you don't want to help me, give me the referral to the neurologist. Luckily, primary, and this was a Spanish speaking primary, which was surprising. Again, she didn't know too much. She didn't know too much about dementia and she was just chalking it up to old age. But she referred and sure enough, when they did the testing, mom did have Alzheimer's disease. But luckily the daughter, was the advocate for mom to get that. And I do hear that in other stories where, in the Latino community, the minority communities where, okay, the doctor says it's normal aging, okay, we'll just let it go. And that's very, very unfortunate.
And I think that speaks to something that Tanis brought up earlier is the issue of workforce development, right? Like, to what extent do we have both providers who are culturally and linguistically competent and also understand issues of older age, right? Like, you know, the issues around how to diagnose dementia, how to manage other conditions associated with aging, right? I think that's a huge gap in terms of some of our medical training, so. So,
There's no doubt about that. And, you know, as researchers, I would encourage you to not forget the paid caregivers, because even some of our family members become that, right? The SEIU here in Southern California represents our IHSS workers. If you want access to them, they've got them pooled over there. So, and they're looking for, you know, support of these individuals who deliver unbelievably hard services and have just as much emotional attachment to their patients as, you know, mom, dad, kid, all the rest. So that's an opportunity I wouldn't want you to leave on the table.
wonderful. And maybe just for our panel, you know, just a very kind of a last thought. You know, is there an area that you really wish researchers did focus on? And I think, Tanis, you mentioned, you know, for example, workforce development, maybe just a couple minutes, you know, something that is not happening that you wish it did, or the community, do you feel the research community has kind of neglected?
I wouldn't call it neglect, but I would call it coming on, you know, on the radar, which is I watch now during fires and floods, the challenge to caregivers in climate emergencies. Don't forget it in your research.
Christopher?
What had been on my mind just about dealing with patients and touch and the things I've seen with patients, the way they calm down or react or more cooperative. I wish there was some measure that we could have, a study that showed me that actually by treating someone this certain way, their blood pressure does go down or their heart rate can go down there, that what the physiological benefits are of caring for people that way. And I think that would help direct or at least encourage, support a caregiver in things that may feel like too fuzzy or touchy-feely, like, no, there's actual benefit from that.
For me, probably going back again to more cultural awareness, when doing diagnosing, you know, maybe even when doing evaluating, looking at a person's, you know, socioeconomical background, the immigration status, just a lot of different things come into play. I think when it comes to the diagnosing or evaluation, I think that needs to be a little bit more expanded. I mean, it's funny because sometimes I have people coming up to me, oh, that's where they make you draw the clock. You know, it's like, they already know it. Like, there needs to be something new.
Drop a line.
Yeah. Put the face on the cat.
My case as a caregiver, I would like to see some long-term study of the effect of caregiving for the, some people already have some heart conditions or kidney conditions, but all the stress goes through and how it works, and you develop the symptoms. And also the end of caregiving is the loss of the loss of loved one.
Right.
So in my personal case, I was okay until the what is called celebration of life. But afterwards, the latent disease become active. So now I have some symptoms. So those kind of stuff might happen to the caregivers. So more long-term study, that means join the caregiving and probably couple years after.
Very good.
Yeah, very good.
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I just wanted to do a big round of applause to our fantastic
All right, I'm gonna go fast, because I see people have had to peel off already, but I also wanted to thank you all. I think this has been an amazing day. Ron Hayes said something at lunch that really resonated for me, which was focusing the retreat on a theme, was really, good, I think, and elevated this, every time I think the retreat I'm in is the best one we've ever had. It's been there for 22 years, but this one's no exception. I think we've had great speakers. We've taken a very comprehensive look at this problem, and I'm going to call it a problem, even though caregiving, I know we have many people in the room who, myself included, do not consider it to have been a burden, but certainly a challenge, right? And I think we've all learned a lot today. We learned about resources in the state. We kind of learned what's there and what isn't there, which is important. I think our researchers in the rooms have learned something about areas from the community's perspective that really need more attention in terms of research, and that's really huge too. I would be remiss if I didn't have us thank our community partners who've been with our center for so long. And I know it's late in the day, and I probably should have done this earlier. For some reason, I lost track of the clock on a lot of things today. Sorry about that. But I'm going to turn the floor over to Catherine for any of the community people who are here still, to have them stand up and thank
Sorry,
Um,
Carmen
them.
just
I
left.
know.
I know.
It's a long guy, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Kathy,
Yeah.
Rosaria, Barbara.
Sorry, here, yeah.
Your
We're so
perspective,
thankful for
yeah.
all of your time and collaboration, and some of you we may be coming after you to join our group. This is really, really appreciate it.
I mean, many of you help us select our scholars, and I think you keep the center authentic and grounded on topics that are important. And, we